Cool. So, Rob, I think you had some questions about the possibility of some Swedish Bernie Bro-style nicknames now that the politics have kind of shifted. I feel like this is a good opener.
Yeah, I was just trying to brainstorm a bit with Ciarán with the Nushi Dadgostar, the head of the Left Party, seems to have gotten a bit, some of the credit for leading this principled stand.
Bit of swag.
At least in the English language media, she's written two things one might have been translated for Jacobin. And so I see her, at least for the international onlookers, filling in a kind of role that's been left vacant for the Corbyns and Bernies of the world. So I was just brainstorming some catchy names. As the local expert, maybe you can help us. All right, here's one. Ciarán's a dad. So Dad Goster dads. That's a good one. A little limited, but
all right.
I could be, I'm not a dad, but I could be a Nushi nephew, Nushi noobs. Even though it's like it's okay, you can be new to it. Get it? Jump on in. The water's great.
Mm-hmm. It's wonderful. Love this.
That's all I got.
Oh, okay.
She had her own sort of fun nickname before she was elected party leader of the Left Party, which was No Shit Dagestar.
Okay.
Oh, okay. That's much better.
Yeah. So something with that I think could work. And then obviously she had to change it once she became like a mainstream politician.
No. I like the idea of just like giant plastic, like placards all across Stockholm and Malmö and Gothenburg, just like vote no shit.
I mean, isn't this all part of bringing back? I don't know if confrontation's the right word, but maybe that's exactly what the Swedish left needs on the national electoral scale.
Yeah,
definitely.
Just like wedgies for your enemies. That's just like one of the promises on the placard.
I like that language too. Wedgies for your enemies. Just fully on declaring like the Liberal Party to be like the enemy.
Yeah, but it's also a bit of populist, like just like, it's a bit vague. We don't have to define your enemy. So, random Swedish person on the street that could be, a political enemy could also just be like, I don't know, someone who skipped you in the queue once or something.
That's the common enemy of all Swedes.
Hey, welcome to your weekly corner Späti. We're here with myself, Ciarán, obviously, and I'm also joined by Rob.
Yo.
Nick and Yulia are all fighting the good fight at, I don't know, the behest of some Russian oligarch, probably. Is it a joke? Is it not? Who knows? But we are joined this week by the lovely Mia Mulder. Say hello, Mia.
Hello. Hey, son.
Oh,
I'm here as the resident Swede, so I'm going to try to be obnoxiously Swedish.
Yes. I shouted out into the void of the internet of, we would like a Swede, and the fans responded with, you should get Mia, she might actually respond to you, unlike these other people. I'm like, okay, cool. Naturally enough, I think people have probably realized, if they've been paying attention on the media, the internet and all that, that Sweden grabbed a bit of attention recently for the online left of due to do with rent and pulling out and kind of collapsing the government there for a second. And then they're now fine, it's grand. But, for a hot second.
For a split second, we didn't have a government.
Yeah, very reminiscent of the time Ireland accidentally legalized drugs for a day. That was a great time. But, so, this is why we want to talk about Sweden, and we kind of want to do the typical kind of Sweden has problems too episode, which is something that you kind of have to confront when dealing with English-speaking media. Not every, unless corrected, most people will think Sweden is perfect and they've solved society.
We're the perfect socialist dream paradise landscape where we eat what's it called, reindeer farts, and just have a good, perfectly free university and healthcare, and that's all you need, really.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes they'll point to other Nordic countries, and there's like different flavors. Like Denmark is the perfect society if you love racism. Finland is the perfect society if you love alcoholism. Good stuff like that. Norway if you love money. The classic stuff. But Sweden seems to be your all-round, most populated Nordic country, so it's a good one to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's the one that's like typically Nordic.
Who are Nordic? Yes, let's go with that.
just to infuriate the Danes even more, who we become the Nords.
I think we've made our opinions clear on this podcast. This is an anti-Danish podcast. But yes, I think we want to talk a little bit about. Well, first of all, before we go into the events of the last couple of weeks, we should probably talk about how Sweden's robust social democracy, I'm not going to lie, had something pretty good going there in the latter half of the 20th century. How that's kind of been a bit attacked, and how it kind of got started.
Yeah. And I do think it's not an arbitrary place, like going back to this point, because I don't know if it's the exact lowest seat total, but the Social Democratic Party, I guess one of the protagonists today, is, if not at their lowest seat total, then the coalition, the cabinet coalition, is barely 35% of the total seats in the parliament in Sweden. And it's basically like hand in hand with the loss of the eating away at the gains that are associated with social democracy, is also the Social Democratic Party's like eating away at their number of seats in parliament. So yeah, to tell that story, how they're gotten into a position today that a vote of no confidence could win against the prime minister, who's from this party, I guess we do have to go back in time.
Yes,
I love quick history. This is my field. I love it.
Yeah. We're doing quick history. We're going to tell you everything you need to know about Sweden. Then that's it. That's fine. That's all. In an hour and a half, we're going to get it done. Okay, we're gonna flash back to the 80s when Sweden began. But okay, so 1982, we have a social democratic government. We have them kind of dealing with a global context that was not in the favor of welfare spending, which is to say, you've got Reagan in the White House, you've got Thatcher in Downing Street, you've got the Arab oil crisis, all kind of affecting the world. Like, this is like where we get a lot of these social welfare cut turns in pretty much every country. Sweden is not exempt from this. And this affected them. And during this period, the Social Democrats had to basically renege on a bunch of promises of expanding the welfare state. They didn't shrink it during this period, but they didn't expand it either. They had some plans to do that. And that hurt them. And then they return in 1994.
Olaf Palme is shot in the meantime, too.
Oh, yeah, we should probably mention that. Olaf, yeah, that's kind of a bit of a deal. That's, yeah, we visit our website, operationglad.io. But they come back in 1984, and this is when they do some public welfare cuts. This is kind of when you get your center-left party moving to the right. They've accepted the logic of austerity. They've accepted that the only way for Sweden to grow is to impoverish some of their hardest-hit citizens. Classics. You all know it. It's happened in your country too, listener. Yeah, so this is when the Social Democratic Party is got into like this kind of logic. I think a classic example of since the 90s has been, in contrast with some of Sweden's neighbors, a mass privatization of schools. Something that occurred. Okay, interesting. Like, how bad is it? Is it like Volvo presents lower education, or
it's almost like that. Like, you're making a joke, but it's almost. I think one of the largest sort of privately owned schools right now, no one really knows who owns it. Yeah, actually. So it's unknown, like hedge fund manager. Maybe it could be the Chinese government. We don't know. Just owns this like massive private school company. And that's like an ongoing bit of a controversy. And whenever like people talk about how maybe the Swedish school privatization system has maybe been a bit of a failure, there's always going to be like old Swedish aristocrats making articles in various newspapers talking about how not privatizing school systems is the same as communism.
Okay.
Yeah. So in Sweden, like communism is when profits are not being taken out of students.
I mean, 10-year-old students are very good assets. 12 years old, they get risky, but you diversify, get them all together, and you'll be all right.
Exactly.
Yeah. I do like the idea that like this mystery school owner, there's like, I don't know, that seems like a weird like YA novel. If you do like really good at your grades and like complete a bunch of magical challenges, you can find out who owns the school. There's some sort of like game to be played.
It's a puzzle.
No one's done it yet. It's Ready Player One for private school ownership, I guess. I
would be so good at Ready Player One if it was about doing homework. Sorry, go ahead.
That seems like the narc version of Ready Player One. It's pretty narky talk already.
Look, we all have our own skills, Ciarán. I'm just saying.
Yeah. But, let's see. The other issue is that, and Mia can correct me if I'm wrong, but like the Swedish Democrats, SAP, they're, sorry, not Swedish Democrats, Social Democrats.
Yes, very different.
Very different. Which I understand now why they have different acronyms. They're kind of like they've been since World War II, basically like the default government for a lot of like Sweden's history.
Yeah. The de facto dictatorship.
Yeah. But like this happens all over. Like in Ireland, we had Fianna Fáil. They were basically unchallenged. In Germany, CDU is basically the default government. Yeah. And that was true for West Germany.
And I gotta say, like SPD in Germany, who's They kind of exist to get kicked around. Yeah, I mean, the Swedish Social Democratic Party was also part of the Second International, and I mean, they had a different history, but like, that is an alternate Germany where the CDU doesn't get to like, be the number one German party. Yeah.
But it is interesting, and we'll get into like where Swedish rent systems actually come from later on, but like a lot of these center-left parties across Europe, they still kind of have a lot of institutions kind of not under their control, but captured effectively. Like the Social Democrats are still kind of like the party of the unions and the party of like the tenant unions or the tenant union. So it's kind of changing now, and I guess that's the pivot that Vänsterpartiet is going for. But yeah, that's
wonderful pronunciation.
Thank you.
Wait, who is the left party? I'm not going to try to say it.
Vänsterpartiet.
Vänsterpartiet.
That's the left party. Those are the ones who took down the government.
Yes. But because historically the SAP, the Social Democrats, they have been the party of these like labor movements in the past, and they're the parties that kind of like formalized Sweden's renting system to the renting system they have today that isn't market rents. They still have a lot of kind of like this old goodwill, which is why they've been in power even since doing these kind of, Volvo Spotify presents history class. So, yeah.
Yeah, they're very much seen, especially like by the Swedish equivalent of like boomers, as being just like that's the party you vote for, unless you're rich. Like then you vote for the Social Democrats. Like the everyman votes for the Social Democrats. That's as you say, that's still very popular amongst a lot of people.
We're seeing it now in Germany, where like our equivalent, the SPD, is doing very poorly, but they have like a really high like floor. There is only like so low that party could ever really go, and that's like 17%, which is like a percentage a lot of other parties in Germany could only dream of, kind of thing.
You're really putting yourself on record saying the SPD can sink no lower. That is a gamble. That is a gamble.
All right, like
Ciarán,
they can
but,
like
hey,
come
you
out.
said it. You said it, not me.
Like, okay, well, yeah, tomorrow they'll come out and say something like anti-Semitic again or something, and we'll see what happens. But like, yeah, cool. So that kind of brings us to that gives you a little bit of context of like how like austerity logic eventually captured what was a decent party, a party that is also kind of the default party, and that brings us to the present. So, or recent present. On Monday, 21st of June, the government failed a vote of no confidence, the first time in Swedish history, as a result of Vänsterpartiet pulling support for the Social Democrat, Green, Löfven government. I don't know if it's Löfven. I'm getting scared of the umlaut.
Löfven.
That's a much sexier name.
You said that exactly like the 4-vote pronunciations I was using to practice for this episode.
So there was a vote of no confidence. The Vänsterpartiet kind of agreed that this was one of their, like, the introduction of market rents was, which everyone listening who's not Swedish probably is familiar with how that system works.
Yeah.
That was one of their, as they say, red lines. Do we have a better word for that? Because red line for Germans means something very different. So it's like the equivalent of through line. Deal breakers, like in a relationship, I guess. Yeah.
One of the big breaking points of the relationship between the Left Party and the Social Democrats.
Yeah. And now there have been other, like, I don't know, things that have chipped away at the rent protections in Sweden, right? Like in the 90s and 2000s. But this last big line of defense is this collectively bargained rent situation. Can you explain that? Like, how it works?
Yeah, I'd love to. So a large part of, like, as you mentioned earlier, because the Social Democrats are sort of the party of the unions, a large part of, like, worker protection or, like, everyday person protection isn't actually in any sort of law, but it has sort of been delegated to unions. So that it's, like, outsourced from politics to be dealt with unions, who then will negotiate with whoever they talk to. So, for example, in the case of renters, it's like landlord associations negotiating with the renters union. And every time they build basically a new housing complex or a new apartment complex, the renters union comes in and negotiates like what the rent should be here. And this agreement, I think we're going to mention it a bit later, the January agreement, basically said that like we're not going to do that system anymore for some newly built housing units. Like if a wealthy capitalist wants to build like a new apartment complex for himself, for example, he shouldn't have to negotiate with the renters union unless he wants to. And this wouldn't affect every housing unit, but it would affect like an amount of housing units. Mm-hmm. And this is not something that the Left Party liked, or the renters union liked. The renters union hated this. They thought that this would be a disaster, basically.
Kind of be the effective death of the renters union, because then at that point, like, well, they would function like a renters union like does in Germany, which is basically just informs tenants of their rights.
Yeah, and that it really wants to avoid that position because it's sort of been delegated to that role already in many respects. But they're sort of the fact that they do have sort of a monopoly on rent negotiation is something that they're very proud over, and something that obviously they don't want to give away. And also we've seen how, because a lot of like center parties argue that because it would only affect a very small amount of housing units, it's not actually that big of a deal. It's not like something to worry about. But we've seen when renters unions have been taken power away from them, like in Finland, for example, very quickly that also starts to affect housing units that already exist, for example, or housing units that are maybe just refurbished instead of like newly built, and slowly over time, like this is sort of the first nail in the coffin of the renters union. So that's why it was such a red line thing.
Yeah, which makes sense. So naturally, this is something that Vänsterpartiet and representing these tenants' unions to a certain extent, and also representing their voters, because I don't think anyone's voting like for Vänsterpartiet to introduce market rents. I mean,
that's actually a good point too, because like during this entire debacle, like a lot of people did polls about whether like what people thought about market rents. Literally, like no majority of any political party wanted market rents. Like even the moderate party, which is like socially conservative, but socially liberal, but economically conservative. Or that one. Even their voters were very much like against this. So it was a bit of a mystery, like why this was happening in the first place. But yeah, so the left party were basically the only party out of all of these parties that actually was like, no.
Yeah, I mean that's. I wish that was surprising, but that kind of seems to be the anything that isn't like a membership-driven party is pretty much exists to enact policies that not even their own voters like.
Yeah.
The classic example of Germany is just like how every party is in favor of continued NATO membership, even though the vast majority of the German public fucking hates NATO. So,
yeah.
And the way I understand it is that the Social Democrats do a thing where, because I saw the Prime Minister, Löfven, he like said, well, I'm against market rents too. Like our party position is against it, but we will enter this coalition because otherwise we don't have enough seats where we accept it, you know? So it's like, what does it matter what your party's for if in the end you're like, you know, you agree to this?
Which is that is an interesting thing, because speaking of which, it also seems like there is a sizable wing of the Social Democrats that are glad that this has happened. They're kind of like activist and supporter base. They have a wing of the party called Reformisterna, which I guess means reformists, probably.
Yeah.
Cool. I know Swedish now.
Do you have any strong thoughts on them? I don't know if you had like an opinion. They seem like a little similar, like this main person, I forget his name, who's kind of the head of that wing, seems similar to Kevin Kühnert here in Germany, who sometimes gets polarized reactions. So
yeah, I don't. To be honest, I think most Swedes don't really think about them that much, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I think that they have like a fairly okay like goal, but most people who want to like pull the Social Democratic Party to the left have already joined the left party. So that's sort of the current vibe.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I can imagine.
That's seems pretty common, but it is worth pointing out that there are insiders within Löfven's party that are like pissed that this even happened to begin with. I'm pissed of specifically the thing that supposedly tied their hands to this, which is something I want to talk about because of how incredibly fucked it is. The January agreement.
Yeah.
So
wait, but I want to give the context for this quickly because
go for it.
Like, so I mentioned earlier that I thought the Social Democrats had their lowest vote total ever. It is the lowest vote total since 1911 that they got.
Yeah.
So not good. And the only members of it was a really split election in 2018. This when the Swedish Democrats jumped up, which I know we're getting to them. So there were multiple rounds, right, of like trying to form a government that didn't take because there so many 8 different parties or something. And
for months this happened. Like that's why it's called the January agreement, because the election was like in October or September or something like that. And for like half a year, they just had to keep negotiating and renegotiating about like how would you form a government.
Yeah. So it's the I guess the ruling coalition, even though they have like way under 50%, which is the Greens and the Social Democrats, with these 2 neoliberal parties, the Center and the Liberals, signing on for this agreement. And then the left kind of there, but I don't know. We'll get into it.
Yeah, I guess
But
like
that's
okay.
the
So
background.
the big achievement of this, I guess, by if you were to ask like a current Social Democrat stan, a Lufin stan, Lufin sounds French. Anyway,
Levin.
Levin. Okay, I can do this. So Levin stands the people who are like under his Instagram being like, "Come to Brazil."
That's me. I'm telling him to come to Berlin.
Yeah.
Come kick it. I have a new open air. He can invest. Sorry.
Come to Brazil, get COVID. People who would kind of like sit for this party, or like some political commentators who maybe you're saying this is great, even though they're probably have always been liberal voters, kind of talked about how great it was that he broke up the blue bloc. Yeah, because the two neoliberal parties that Rob is referring to have basically been the like, I want to vote moderates, but I don't want to vote moderates party.
Yeah.
Moderates being the center-right party of Sweden. They effectively existed to like bolster the moderates' numbers beforehand. But through the January agreement, they've broken up the blue bloc. They've taken these two toys away from the moderates. And that's the kind of narrative of people who are in Lufin's corner are kind of like saying is what happened. However, if we look through the January agreement, kind of looks like those two parties have kind of the run of the show, and they get to do what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we go through? Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I do like I should say that like breaking up the blue bloc is something that's like really should. Like that is something that's like true that Löfven stands actually do have a kind of a little bit of a point to, because the entire blue bloc is like made up from like conservative Christian Democrats to the center right liberal parties who are like fairly progressive on a lot of social issues. But the only reason that the blue bloc exists, called the Alliance, because they're nerds. It only exists because the Social Democrats had such an incredible hold over power over Swedish politics for such a long time. So that every single opposition party, except the left, basically, and the environmental party, had to sort of unite under this big tent coalition to take them down. And for the last couple of elections, it has been between these two coalition blocks, who's going to win that. And since the rise of the Swedish Democrats, that sort of politics doesn't really work anymore because suddenly no one has a majority. So a lot of people are crediting him with sort of destroying the right wing a little bit. And it has sort of worked too, because a lot of sort of more conservative and more liberal people on the right in Sweden are just hating each other now over this thing, which, I don't necessarily love the January agreement. I think it's pretty bad, but I do like seeing the right wingers fight each other. Yeah.
I know I have a similar feeling when I look at current Spanish elections where the terrible anti-Catalonian independence party that's tried to present itself as centrist and stuff like that got very right wing and is now tanking. I'm like, yes, you deserve it. Fuck you. And then I was like, where are those votes going? Oh, they're going to Vox. Oh no. They're going to the neo-Francoist party. Oh no.
Damn it.
Yeah. That is interesting. I guess I'm slightly concerned, and I wonder if this is actually something that is true on the ground in Sweden, that this is maybe more forcing the hand of the moderates and the Christian Democrats to side with the Swedish Democrats. Maybe not in a formal way, I can imagine a future where the Sweden Democrats become the Vänsterpartiet of the moderates. You'll be excluded from cabinet positions, but you'll be supporting us the whole way, and we need your numbers, and
that's basically how a lot of people on the right are already seeing the Swedish Democrats, as a potential for the next election.
Right.
But weirdly enough, that's not really going to work because the Swedish Democrats are too popular. So the leader of the Swedish Democrats has basically said that if if you want Swedish Democrat support, we're in the government.
Right.
So,
okay.
so there's a bit of tension there, and no one really knows how that's going to turn out. And so the place of the moderates are really complicated because they want to be in power, but they also can't, like, they don't want to give any power to the Swedish Democrats. Whereas the Christian Democrats are fine jumping into bed with the Swedish Democrats. They love it.
I saw that.
I mean, I see if they're like, we're all going to do it anyway, so I want the best seat. I call shotgun.
Yeah. The Swedish Christian Democrats are also, like, in comparison to most Christian democratic parties in Europe, like, hyper conservative. They're, like, much more akin to like right-wing evangelicals in the US than they are to, like, any Christian democratic party in Europe. So they're not comparable to, like, the German Christian Democrats.
The CDU,
far right. Like, far, far right.
The CDU, the Christian part of the CDU kind of, like, fell away a long time ago. Like, isn't Merkel, like, an open atheist or something? Or was she an atheist? I can't, yeah. People say that about her because she's from East Germany. I can't remember.
Yeah, but it started as in the 60s, right? As this kind of, like, I don't know, like, kind of the Christian Democrats. Like, it's recent and maybe more. It's like a protest party, right? Out of like some of the societal movements. That's what I understood.
A little bit, yeah. Like, it's a combination of the Bible Belt, of, like, the hyper conservative people in the south of Sweden, and it's also a conglomeration of all sort of like indie churches. Sweden has a lot of, like, independent churches that are all, like, super weird, are all basically small cults, and are super secretive, and, like, there should probably be, like, a big news story about controversy here, but it hasn't broken yet. But
interesting.
That's a weird thing.
Yeah, if you get a few million more followers, you could be like the Justin Bieber. Like, who is Justin Bieber's pastor? What's up with him? They'd be trying to get you. There'd be a lot of competition over you, I'm sure.
Probably.
This is fascinating to me because this is like, I feel like I would have scrapped this whole episode and just talk about this because I come from, like, institutionally Catholic Ireland where there is no other church. But there is that one other, but like, indie churches, I'm just imagining, like, mid-2006 or, like, mid-2000s, 2006 style, like, indie bands from, like, the UK, like the Claxons or something giving a sermon. Sorry, I got very distracted by the idea of indie churches. And that leads us, I think, pretty well to talking about the January Agreement, which I kind of already alluded to here. We kind of got a bit derailed, but let's actually get into what's in the January Agreement, because I just, in the notes for this episode, a little bit behind the scenes for the listeners at home, I just copy and pasted the whole thing into the bottom of the notes, because I was like, no, I need this down here because this is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. It's a much longer document. I think I just have in here the opening points, the main points. I can't remember how they described it. They get into more specifics around, like, environmentalism and things like that in their own kind of sections, but they open with, the Centre Party and Liberals agree to abstain from voting against Le Fin's re-election, which is what we've kind of talked about. That makes sense. That's the whole rub of the situation. Fine. Mention it first. The second point, the left party shall not receive any influence over Swedish politics for the following years. I'm like, all right.
known colloquially as the humiliation clause.
But it's like, I mean, together they need the left party to have a majority, right? To, like, pass
yes.
laws and budgets and stuff. So they're relying on, I was thinking of this earlier when you mentioned could the Swedish Democrats be the left party of the right? But so much of this relies on, like, basically the conscience of, like, left-wing people being like, well, if you don't just take whatever we give you, that's going to be a right-wing government. So, deal with it. Yeah. And I mean, it's an open question whether the Swedish Democrats would be like, I don't know. Oh, well, like, we're just here to have, like, fun and try to rile up all the racists. Versus, like, that is like an enduring thing, not only in Sweden, but in a lot of European countries that, like, yeah, but you won't do it. You won't risk having the, like, right wing in power. Which, spoiler alert, I mean, they did, and it worked out. But
Yeah.
No one would risk having the right wing in power. Don't look at the 30s. Don't ever look at the 30s anywhere in Europe.
No, but like the Social Democrats have done this for like not just this election, but also the last election, and maybe the one before that as well, where they basically sort of bullied the left party into being like a doormat a little bit,
Right.
saying that like you can either support our government in exchange for nothing, or it's going to be a far right government, maybe with the support of the Swedish Democrats. And for a lot of leftists, that's an easy choice, but it still sucks. And it's just that it turns out that like they pushed it a bit too far with this last little push.
Yeah, and I guess the interesting thing, and like to make it clear at home, like this is Vänsterpartiet is not officially part of the government. They're confidence and supply, which means they need their votes to get things passed, but they're not a part of the cabinet. They're not like given any kind of ministerial roles. But neither are the Liberals or the Centre Party. They're also providing confidence and supply. But they were invited to these to this agreement, to these discussions. Like you're specifically excluding. There's like no difference in terms of relationship. The actual government being like the Social Democrats and the Greens. There is no different relationships between these other three parties, except the strident belief of
this long document saying, but we're only going to listen to these two parties.
Yeah, the long document that says "nanny nanny boo boo," basically. Yeah, so there's a lot of other little things in here that I kind of want to talk about. But is there any particular, besides this very egregious second point, is there any other little highlights, any other tidbits, Mia, that you want to talk about, or Rob?
Not necessarily. It's more that when this clause, the doormat clause or the humiliation clause, was added to the agreement, it was added without the knowledge of the left party, and once it became public, the then leader of the left party said that that sucks. We're not going to support an agreement like that. And the only way it went through was after a private talk between Stefan Löfven and Jonas Sjöstedt, who was the leader of the party then.
Yep.
And after that, he came out and said okay, we're not going to vote against the government. But there are two red lines in this, and as long as you don't cross those two red lines, we're going to do it. But if you do those two red lines, we're going to vote down the government. That's just what we're going to do.
Yeah.
That has sort of been looming over Swedish politics for a long time, ever since the January Agreement. Up until now.
And then they went and did it anyway.
Look at the sword of Damocles. Shame if it dropped. But yeah, so the other one was, okay, so the market rents was the other one. Was the other one about privatization of the employment office or something like that?
May have been. I don't actually remember, because it hasn't really come up that much in Swedish discourse since since the other one was crossed. But it may have been that. I know that sort of has gone back and forth for a long time now, how the reform of the employment office should look like. But it hasn't really materialized into anything. So I don't think it hasn't really been a big part of Swedish politics lately.
Right, yeah. But it is one of the points in the opening of the January Agreement. I think it's the last point, is the public employment service will undergo a fundamental reform and will have to compete with private employment agencies, which is weird. Okay.
But very weird.
The one point I wanted to mention,
go on.
is just I don't know. I feel like it's typical right wing shift that passing a test in Swedish and the basics of civics shall be mandatory to acquire Swedish citizenship. On the one hand, all these centrist parties are moving to the right on immigration. I believe the Vänsterpartiet has not done anything like that, but I could be mistaken.
Vänsterpartiet is the only party that hasn't shifted to the right at all. Well, they've shifted to the right in the sense that they've become sort of left-leaning social democrats instead of outright communists. But that happened in the 90s after the fall of the Soviet Union. So can't really blame them for that.
But the reason that just seems there's something so ironic. I hope I'm using it right. Like ironic in the like, I'm sure, I don't know what the citizenship test would be like in Sweden, but like even in Germany, for example, there's like at least a few questions in there on like fundamentals of German culture. Like, what does it mean to have free speech in Germany? And I guarantee you some aspect of that test would be like, what does Swedish equality mean and Swedish fairness and like all these things. And it's like, oh yeah, and the next line in this agreement is getting rid of that stuff. So it's like, what, like they act like this is like, yeah, you know, that's what we are in Sweden. We have this equality and, you know, this protection and fairness that we're also getting rid of at the same time as we're introducing this test. It's like the opposite of the meme when you study for social democracy, but, when social democracy is on the test, but you should have studied for neoliberalism.
I imagine the Swedish citizenship test is basically, once you do the language portion or whatever, is just they sit you down in front of Reddit and ask you to post a really epic photo of the king with like a silly hat on. That's what I imagine.
Classic Swedish tradition to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a silly king.
The final step of it is to have to eat a piece of surströmming. And if you can eat piece of stinky fish, then you're officially Swedish.
Then you get to unlock the good pastries we have. Not until you have your surströmming.
You have to have the stinky fish, and then you can have the benefits.
Yeah. But yeah, the other fun ones that I just kind of wanted to highlight quickly was just like they have this taxes on environmentally unfriendly goods, which is just like cool. That's how you get yellow vests. Do you want a yellow vests? Yeah. There's some other basic stuff like just taxes on the rich being lowered, and hang on, was this one? Yeah, the government is to refrain from proposing legislation which limits or prevents the private sector from generating profits from their work in the welfare system.
Yes,
which just feel like is very evil.
I need to go into this because this is something that comes up quite a lot. A lot of times people think that, well, private welfare things, that's common, right? That exists in a lot of countries. There are like private schools and private elder homes and stuff like that. But Sweden has a unique system that only exists here. Because in all other countries, if you have a private company in some sort of sense, it is often privately funded. Or if it is government funded, the government funds have to be reinvested, or they have to be part of the actual program that you're offering. You can't profit from the government investments, but in Sweden you can. So a company can set up like an elder care facility, for example, take 1 million Swedish crowns, which is our currency, and just provide the worst service imaginable for like half of that money, and then just pocket the rest of it. And instead of being an argument for like, oh, we should lower the subsidies to this company, this is seen as a good thing because they're very profitable companies, and they can employ more people, and they can invest this more. And Sweden is the only place that has this. And whenever someone argues against this system, people go into media and say like, any alternative to this is communism.
That's how the schools work too, right?
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The schools work like this. Some healthcare systems work like this a lot, and some welfare systems work like this. It is like one of the most unpopular things in Sweden that exists, and it's impossible to get rid of for some reason. Mystery.
We like every country has these where there's just like, because of course that's what they do. It's like, okay, they got 1 million crowns. They spend half of it on making sure that your like grandmother isn't like freezing to death. And then they spend the other half of it on not pocketing it, but reinvesting it into like a PR guy who like writes just the dumb shit opinions in like a publication, and then gets to go on TV and be like, look, my dad's famous and rich, so I get to be here and tell you that like private healthcare is sick, actually. And then they do a kickflip or something. I don't know how it works.
Yeah,
but
that's why I'm trying to get these Swedish school teachers, healthcare administrators to get them to Berlin, invest in my open air club / vintage clothing thrift store. I got big plans. There's gonna be a big beach section. They can make a lot of money.
Yeah. We'll get to like Yeah, okay, so well, we're jumping ahead, but like Swedish capital is also running ravage in Berlin. Yeah. It's a lot of. I imagine the energy is just a bunch of rich guys in Sweden being like, "Fucking stupid communist government won't let me just like do shit here. All right, fuck it, I'll do it in Germany."
That's how I'm trying to pick. I wait outside the buildings, like holding the door for them, and then I try to run up and be like, "Have you heard of this club?"
You're just like you're doing like 1930s street urchins. Like, please, can I have some investor capital? Can I have some seed funding? Right. So that's the January agreement, which kind of came out and has kind of like it is the forebearer of all this stuff happening. The Centre Party, unsurprisingly, and since this whole kerfuffle, for lack of a better word, has kind of revealed themselves to be like the party that really wanted market rents. Like, and you also said that Löfven kind of basically stated the same thing as well. Oh, we need the government, so we gave them what they want. So that's fair.
And in speeches, Del Costa, the head of the Left Party, talks about how it's like Löfven's government and the Social Democrats are like the junior partner in the coalition, which I think is a pretty good burn.
Yeah. I did you watch? They subtitled that video, so I got to watch the speech. Yeah. Löfven looks very sad just through the whole thing. It's just, it's just, yeah. Throughout
this entire sort of like political drama, he hasn't really just been looking tired and just like exhausted because he was so expecting the Left Party to just like go along with what he wanted, and you can tell that like he just wants to have a stable government, but he'll never have one.
No. But this kind of leads us to an interesting thing, because we did mention there was a vote of no confidence. It went through. It's the first in Swedish history, apparently, or modern history, I guess.
That has passed, yes.
That has passed, yeah, that's fair. Because like this is a thing that like various weird, aggressive opposition parties do all the time in every country. They're just like, motion of no confidence on Tuesday. All right, 3 people voted for it. Cool.
Yeah.
I made my speech. But speaking of which, the person who actually called for the motion of no confidence was Jimmy Åkesson.
We just know him as Jimmy around these parts, you know.
Yeah, we call him Big Jimmy.
He comes to Berlin. He's a big spender when you know.
Yeah. Rob asked him for seed investment.
He does really look like in a Silicon Valley investor, bro.
Oh, we'll get to that because he kind of is.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So Åkesson is that closer? Åkesson?
Jimmy Åkesson.
Jimmy Åkesson. Okay, there we go. Mm-hmm. Leader of the Swedish Democrats was the person who called for the no confidence vote, and that was kind of a win-win for him because the two outcomes would have been beneficial for him. Either Vänsterpartiet votes with the Social Democratic government, and Vänsterpartiet, you've got a new stick to beat them with because they betrayed their voters and their ideals and stuff. Or Vänsterpartiet helps you collapse the government, and you've collapsed the government, which you also hate. So win-win for our boy Jimmy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I have to,
No, you go.
No, just he said in interviews like he's bragging that, you know, we are the first party to like take down the government, and it's like, does this help someone like with their wages? You know, if they're not making enough money, if they can't afford rent. But hey, that's what the Swedish Democrats are doing for you.
In his mind, a boat of Syrians were on their way through the Baltic Sea, and it's like, everyone turn around. The Jimmy did it. He collapsed the government.
Damn him.
We'll be back, Jimmy.
It's fun too because like he really wants to take credit for this as well. But like in polls after the government fell, everyone knows that the Left Party was sort of responsible for like, you know, causing this drama in the first place, even if they didn't do the vote of no confidence. So the confidence for Nooshi Dadgostar has like risen significantly after this, and the Left Party has basically lost nothing. or actually gained some support during this chaos. So for some reason, even though this is a win-win for the Swedish Democrats, they didn't really win that much.
Yeah, it is worth pointing
out
that
Jimmy guarantee win-win.
Still lose.
Somehow you lose.
But that is like to kind of emphasize that point. It took me like it was article like 5 or whatever that I was reading about this event where it was like they finally mentioned that this was the guy who called for the motion of no confidence. Like this is not getting a lot of international attention, certainly. If anyone brings up the Swedish Democrats, they're bringing up the context of how it looks like the Blue Bloc, the alliance, might have to start working with them more. So that's they don't even mention that he did this. But at this point, I'd like to, because he's a bit of a character, I'd like to turn to you, Mia. What kind of Kai is our Åkesson?
Imagine Richard Spencer, but somehow smarter, and also just like a bit more obvious. Like at the same time, he's like smarter in hiding his true colors, but also he's also just more obvious in what those true colors are. I'm not sure if that makes sense. He joined the Swedish Democrats. I think in like 1994, back when they were like a neo-Nazi, like white supremacist, like full on, not hiding whatsoever behind their white supremacist roots. Which he has been forced to sort of be like, no, I didn't actually join. I just had like minor disagreements about like European politics that I agreed with the Swedish Democrats about.
Right.
But ever since he became a leader, he has sort of really led a big reform of the Swedish Democrats to be more presentable, to be more sort of like an acceptable version of like far right-wing conservatism. And they've managed to survive basically by being the only party that is really talking about like immigration, especially like in the early 2010s, because that became like a big talking point in Swedish politics. But a lot of political parties didn't really want to budge on like being accepting to refugees, whereas the Swedish Democrats were like very openly like racist and xenophobic, which also forced like a significant amount of parties to also sort of like shift right and also become hostile on refugees. Which just ended up boosting the Swedish Democrats even more, because now their positions are seen as more legitimate. So it just like, it keeps going. That's sort of what he has done. But it should be said, like, you know, he joined this when it was a white supremacist, like super Nazi organization. And, he's just like a weird guy.
Well, yeah. So okay. So there's a lot of things there. I get your point very, very much about like, you know, he's definitely made it like the more respectable party. I think there was a party that merged into them or something that was called Alternative for Sweden, which was like, it looked like an exact carbon copy of Alternative for Deutschland, which is a party that actually started off less right wing and became more right wing, because they were at one point they were like respectable libertarian party that just hated the euro, and now they're like weird, you know, blood and soil nationalists.
But you said there was also a Swedish Progress Party. So did they just copy every right-wing party around the world?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So like there was Swedish Progress Party, which, like, from what I can tell, seems to be a rip-off of Progress Party from Norway, which we did an episode about them. It's still like the only episode where we had to put like a content warning on the front of, because they're monsters. And then like, but yeah, it's also kind of harder to hide like, oh, we're not Nazis, when like one of the parties you come from is literally called like Keep Sweden Swedish, and like another party you came from's logo was like an Iron Cross, which I'm like, maybe you can get away with that in Germany, but you're not even German. Come on.
Yeah. The founder of the Swedish Democrats was actually a member of the Nazi SS. Like,
yes,
just a whole ass, not even like a neo-Nazi, just like a full-on actual.
Yeah,
like,
Nazi classic.
Nazi.
Like,
yeah. And, you know, he wasn't part of the party, I think, when Jimmy joined, But he was definitely in the party when like most of the higher ups in the Swedish Democrats joined, who are still there. So it's very clear that like Jimmy is only really in charge because he is the presentable option. Anyone else regularly gets into drama, or well, I say drama. They get like videotaped being super racist or xenophobic or anti-Semitic in public. There was an iron pipe scandal where like some people super high up in the Swedish Democrats like walked around Stockholm with an iron pipe and called random women passing by for various slurs and like threatening to beat people with pipes. I think like a third or something of the people in our like parliament equivalent has been convicted of, or like either convicted or like charged with some sort of violent crime, compared to like an average of like 2% or like 1% or something like that, which is like what you would expect. So Jimmy, despite being super weird and like super like racist, is like the best they have to offer.
Yeah, this is,
it's funny to describe him as a like Richard Spencer widely known as the like dapper, suave Nazi, but he's not suave or dapper.
He's got an undercut and a fade, Rob. I'm tricked. Like, look at this young guy. Young people are progressive.
But the thing with Richard Spencer is that like Richard, like he gets caught regularly, like just being a Nazi, like saying really Nazi shit. Jimmy is smart enough to know that he can't do that. And he's smart enough to also like chastise other members of his party that do that, even though that it happens quite frequently. Like he's really good at disciplining like himself and his own party that like they can't have a bad image anymore. They can still be Nazis, but they can't have a bad image about it.
Right.
Yeah, this seems very reminiscent of a Forum for Democracy in Netherlands. They had like a very kind of like suave young guy. He even had the undercut kind of thing. He kind of pitched himself as a bit of a like intellectual. He always said the word oikophobia, which supposedly means fear of the homeland or something. It's garbage, absolute pseudo-intellectual garbage. But then like last year, like all of his like WhatsApps got leaked and he was talking about like the elders of Zion and shit. And it was like, whoops. So that might happen.
Jimmy has to avoid controversy so that they can incorporate several new splinter right-wing parties. The Swedish Phalangists. This one's just called Swedish Nazis. I guess they couldn't think of another one.
Their original name was taken, you know. This one's just called Swedish Democrats 224 _ I guess the name they wanted was taken. So the two things I kind of wanted to bring about that was like, first of all, he's a tech guy, which you mentioned that he kind of reminds you of like a Silicon Valley guy. He had like he was a web designer for a company that he started with the then chair of the Swedish Democrats in like, I want to say early 2000s, 2006, 2008 or something like that. Just grand. They really, really want to talk about the fact that he's like studied all these various disciplines. A lot of his Wikipedia, a lot of his own press says like, oh, he studied philosophy, economics, geography, and law. And I was like, okay, interesting. What's happening here? He did all of those courses at the University of Lund and never like graduated. So that's his claim there.
He just put a lot of like big words. Study epistemology, geology.
I do all the smart classes.
I feel like this is something that happens a lot with a lot of Swedes will do this, where they study like various smart sounding courses for a little bit, never graduate, and then usually either found a company or work at like their rich parents' company. Like so a lot of wealthy-ish people will do this, where it sounds like they're like accredited and it sounds like they're very smart, but they've never actually like, done anything.
Yes, that happens in Germany too. We're not so different.
Yeah. Cultural brethren.
The only other thing that I wanted to say about Jimmy before we moved on is shortly before 2014, it was reported that Åkesson had engaged in extensive gaming and this year invested 500,000 kroner in online casinos, which love that energy. That's the kind of like high roller energy we need in the Swedish parliament. I'm assuming as someone who's just learning about Swedish politics now. But the other thing is, like, the weird thing about this is I've only met a Swedish Democrat voter once in my life that I've, like, actually spoken to. It was a young guy or whatever, but the only thing I distinctly remember about him is he also was massively in debt for online gambling. I was like, that's just representation. I like that.
That's the benefit of having, like, multiple parties in parliament. There's a party for everyone.
The online gambling party.
Yeah, I don't think 15% of Sweden is this guy. Might be a little inflated, Swedish Democrats. But he certainly has captured a slice of society. You said he's a tech guy. I like to imagine that, cause a lot of, like tech people, when they're talking about like crypto and Bitcoin, they're like, no, it could work like it's like an alternative currency. He's just like, no, there's just no rush like gambling on crypto. That's why I like it. Red or, betting on red or black, that's like Ethereum or Dogecoin. There's like no better feeling.
But yeah, that's Yimmy. I feel like we need to do a whole episode on the Swedish Democrats, because we've dealt with like far right parties in Europe before that are just like very obviously descended from the Nazis. Austria's FPU is the same. Which, Austria, yikes. But like, yeah, I think we can move on to actually talking about the meat and potatoes, which is rent. What this is all about.
Yeah.
Because
the raison d'etre for government collapse.
So, as we've already alluded to, the system of renting in Sweden is a bit different from what you listener are probably used to in like the United States, UK, Germany, what have you. There is no rent control as you would kind of know it. There's a formalized collective bargaining via tenants union. Correct me if I'm wrong here, you don't even have to be a member of the tenants union to benefit from this. Is that correct?
Yes. So rent, for the vast majority of cases, sometimes you can get around this by being illegal, by renting out illegally. But for the vast majority of cases, the rent is not something that you like. It's not something that like is between the landlord and the renter. It's between like. It's just something that rent is just placed on an apartment, like an apartment or like an apartment block will have a type of rent, and then it doesn't matter who like rents it. It doesn't matter like their credentials or whatever. It doesn't really matter what the landlord wants. Just that's that rent that it has, and it is set that way in negotiations between the landlord and the renters union. And there are more like there are like individual cases, like local chapters of this union will have like negotiations with local landlords and talk about what they should have like on an individual level, and then there are national conversations between like landlord associations, organizations, and the national part of this, and they hash out things like how much should like distance from public transport affect rent, how should like price per square meter affect things? How should the condition of the apartment affect things? So they deal with the details of it all. Yeah, and you can't really escape it because because every apartment basically is affected by it. Like I didn't become a member until fairly recently, unfortunately, and. But my rent has changed because they've negotiated new rents for my apartment, because they don't really care about me. It's my apartment that has to be lowered in terms of rent.
Right. Well, that's fair, and like it kind of follows naturally that when you get these two like opposing forces at a negotiation table, that of course is going to be based on like quote-unquote objective factors, like you said, like location of public transport, quality of the apartment when the building was built. That's kind of how like most rent control kind of stuff operates. Like they try to tie it to some sort of like number or statistic or index. Like the Mietendeckel that was overturned here in Berlin was tied to like square footage and year built. Am I getting that right, Rob? Yeah.
Actually, I'm not sure. I didn't benefit, so...
And then you get but then you get you get to find the fun information of which weird government of Germany's past built your building. And was it one of the fun ones or the terrible ones? But yeah, so that's kind of what happened. But this tenants association was founded in 1923. Their way of running rents was made universal in 1970. and this was done by the Swedish Democrats, which is
The
where they get
Social Democrats.
Social Democrats. God damn it. The Social Democrats. Swedish Democrats have done jack shit. Yeah. And about 36%, about just over a third of the country is renting. Just a clarification. Germany and Austria are quite rare in the sense that you can rent for life. Is that an occurrence in Sweden? Or are you still kind of expected to buy a home eventually?
You're expected to, but you can rent for life.
Right.
But you are definitely expected to buy a place eventually. Either an apartment or a house somewhere.
Yeah. Because you go on?
No, it's just that 6% number sticks out to me because when you're talking about how everyone is against this, the introducing the market rents, is 36% low enough that even if it makes no sense, the parties could be like, well, that's not, there's still the other 64%, so we can still, they'll be fine with it. And basically just be almost like the argument people use in the US to not introduce minimum wage. It's oh, well, you only work at McDonald's if you're 16. So it's basically that, oh, it's only 30%, and that's just your starter apartment anyway. So,
yeah, I think right-wing parties could probably get away with that because the people who vote more right-wing are also more likely to be a bit better off, and usually they have parents who buy houses for them or apartments for them. Very common among rich kids, especially in the bigger cities where rent is a bit higher. Usually, parents will buy a starter apartment for their kid, which they can then flip and sell when the price inevitably goes up even more. But the center and the left definitely can't, because their voters are usually a bit less well off, and those people have a higher tendency to rent. But even despite this, even parties on the right are still against market rents, even though they don't rent even close to as much, which is a good sign. I feel like that's a good sign of Swedish politics, or it's rather the Swedish electorate rather than politics.
So then we get in the situation of introducing market rents and what this would do to Sweden. According to surveys of landlords, they're pretty sure that they all pretty much agree that their property is undervalued based on this system. Ranging somewhere on average about 50% undervalued.
My swag is underappreciated too by my peers. They should reassess.
Yeah. This closet I own in Stockholm is clearly worth more. Look at this nice sconce I put onto it. And they believe studies also found that that is true. There would be a massive increase over time. People. I also wanted to check out the rent situation as it currently stands and compare it with Germany, because it's where we are. Stockholm rent in Germany is about 17% higher than Berlin, for example. But Berlin is a very unique situation, is that it was, bombed and then divided for most of the 20th century. So rent here is quite low. But then, the system does seem to be working. Gothenburg and Malmo rents are much cheaper when compared to, Hamburg and Munich, which would be our second and third largest cities. But I then started looking into how much Stockholm rents in particular would take up of the average salary. It's something like a Stockholm rent is about 42 to 75% of your average salary.
Yeah.
Anywhere in that range. For a central one bedroom. I don't know what this website was defining as central, because sometimes central is right slap bang in the middle of the city, or not central is you are 2 hours out of the city or whatever. It would be very hard to find. But.
Yeah. I would guess that it wouldn't matter super much because the rent in central Stockholm is very uniform. It's more actually dependent on how far away it is from a subway station, and the subway sprawls out fairly significantly. Yeah. The only place in Stockholm that's a bit cheaper than the rest is Rinkeby, which is the sort of it's what Fox News calls the no-go zone.
Nice.
Which which is also like my favorite part of town. But
I do love the idea of just like renters actually coveting that their neighborhood be called like a no-go zone by some sort of reactionary mass media just to drive down rents.
Like this is not a joke. I'm actually like looking to move to Stockholm now, and like all of my friends have recommended me to move like close to northern Stockholm because the rents are lower there, and it's fine. Like it's safe.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I like the neighborhood I live in Berlin has probably been called a no-go zone or something like that. So just making sure I'm getting through all my points here, because it basically looks like that, like as you've mentioned, Mia, when we were talking about this before, this is a massively unpopular position amongst the general public, definitely amongst renters, definitely amongst the tenants union, and landlords love it, basically. What is it? I'm not going to pronounce this correctly. Fastighetsägarna.
Fastighetsägarna.
I just said that. The Swedish real estate lobby, has basically found that like 80% of landlords think that their value is the property is undervalued. They're definitely in support of it. I'd imagine all landlords are. And we do have a decent comparison that we can play with, as you mentioned earlier. Finland is a good comparison because Finland has introduced market rents when they had I'm not sure if it was exactly the same as the Swedish system, but they did have a means of keeping rent prices away from the forces of the market through one system or another. And they introduced this in the early 90s, between 1990 and 1995. They gradually introduced it. They saw the average rents increase by 26% nationwide and 42% in Helsinki, in the capital. And the great kicker to all of this is that while supply increased a little bit in 1995, amongst the when this law was first introduced, they now have a shortage of rental apartments again. This didn't increase supply at all. Yeah. Even though I should say that Finland's social housing building programs are far more aggressive than what Sweden's doing at the moment. They regularly build social housing.
Yeah. And like the supply issue, I think, is like the most crucial thing, because that's been the argument by,
of course,
by basically the entire right wing here, that like we need to deregulate the renting market because like we're in a housing crisis a little bit. There's a housing shortage, and they've all sort of like banged this drum that like if we just allow landlords to set their own rents, then they will be more incentivized to build. Even though there has not been, I don't think there has been any case of that actually happening, except for a very short amount of time, and then it just stagnates because landlords realize they don't need to build more, because then they can just keep the rents high and make more money that way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because that's the incentive. Like that's what, like you've seen this happen in like every other major city that has never had like these kind of renter protections. Dublin and London's come to mind of just like, not only were landlords and property developers not building new things, they were also just holding on to existing property and keeping them empty in order to drive up the average rent. So yeah, there's like no incentive for them to do this. Scarcity drives the prices to go up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the only reason that I've seen that like makes sense from a lot of leftist sort of commentators has been that since it has been like the Center Party and the Liberal Party that have like been most pushing for this type of deregulation, it's quite curious that like a lot of like personal friends of a lot of like high politicians within those parties are also like big landlord names.
What?
Oh no, that's not meant to happen. Oh damn!
Whoopsie.
Oh beans, that's not meant to occur.
Yeah, you act like that's hypocritical, but you're friends with tenants, so you're biased too.
Yeah, we have this as a part of like some sort of arbitrary fair and balanced news reporting tonight. This entire panel of on this discussion of rent or home ownership will be completely chaired by homeless people. They're the only people who don't have skin in the game, and it's just like, this is a weird TV show. But yeah, because like, who do you like? Everyone's either like a tenant, homeowner, or a landlord. So I was like, who do you get to like have the unbiased opinion? I want to talk about. I'm not sure if you know too much about this, but like the social housing situation, or building, like the government building any kind of housing situation. I know in the 60s and 70s there was this very ambitious 1 million housing project that was undertaken by the Social Democrats.
Yes.
Again, reason why people vote for them in the first place.
Yeah. Back when they were good.
Yes. And like that's kind of like, I mean, this is one of the things that you probably hear internationally about why Sweden is great. So they did this kind of aggressive social housing policy. I also find the tendency to like merge all like 4 to 5 Nordic countries into one like ideal Nordic countries, like to kind of talk about is like, we talk about Finnish education or Norwegian healthcare and just act like it's all the same country.
If things had been slightly different in the 1840s, we could have talked about the Nordic unification thing, but unfortunately that's not the word we have. But yeah, miljonprojektet, the 1 million social housing unit project thing, it used to be very popular because it did drive down like rent prices, it did like fix the housing shortage for a short amount of time. But the thing is, the way they did that was building these very like Soviet Union style tenements, like big gray housing units, which are fine. They're perfectly fine. Like you know, I've lived in one. A lot of my friends have lived in them, and they're great. But because they're getting a bit older now, and that also means that the rent of them are getting down a little bit. Means that the people who primarily live in them today are people who have a lower income than average. Right. Oftentimes, like refugees who get like their first apartment in Sweden, for example, that are trying to like move. They usually find these places to be like the cheapest, the most available. And this has led many of the areas where these were built to be labeled like. To be labeled no-go zones, like I mentioned before, right. to be labeled sort of as having a bad reputation because that's where the poor live. So, unfortunately, for like a big part in mainstream discourse, this, even though there is some sort of like a leftist push to have another miljonprojekt, it's probably not going to happen because in the eyes of a lot of people, especially rurally and especially like. If they live in an area that's not one of these places, the way they associate these type of projects with poverty, and they associate it with like lacking assimilation, lacking integration, things of that nature, which in Swedish discourse has become like very toxic.
Yes, I can imagine. It's kind of the same. Like, and you probably get into the same kind of cycles of like certain sections of political operatives, the capitalist class, kind of just deeming these neighborhoods like lost causes to a certain extent, of just like no investment goes into them in any way, shape, or form. My memory of like Malmo kind of struck me as like as soon as you got out of the like nice little old town, it became very like that. There wasn't really much around. But. My experience of Sweden is limited. It's mostly just Max Burger, which is a great place.
Yeah, but you've experienced the best part of Sweden already.
Oh, good. I don't have to go back.
I went to Stockholm once and I got frostbite.
This is the two experiences of Sweden. Of just like I nearly died because of the elements, or I got like a decent burger.
I had a hole in my shoe and there was a big snowstorm and I was walking around all day and my toes were like purple, but it was fine. God. Don't worry. It was just a little bit.
I'm just built different. It's fine. Great. So I think this leads us to like what's happened now in response to all this. So there was this kind of like looming deadline. Löfven had to make a new government, which he has done, kind of.
Yes, he has.
How did he manage that? Who did he get on board? Because it's the friends we know from before, the terrible neoliberal parties, the Greens, who I feel like have been like completely agentless in this whole thing.
Yeah, that's basically how they've been treated for the last 2 decades in Swedish politics, as a sort of like cancerous lump that's connected to the Social Democrats. That are never voted out of parliament either, because everyone just keeps giving them support votes so that they stay in the parliament. It's a wonderful system that they exist. But they're a fine party, and I like them, even though I don't vote for them. So, yeah. Do you mind if I just rant for a little bit about it?
Yeah.
So, yes, the government fell, and the choice that the prime minister has then is he can either like call a new election or resign. And calling a new election seems that it would probably almost guarantee a right-wing government at this stage. So that was like very much not something that he wanted to do. So he decided to resign, which left the Speaker of the House in charge to try to form a new government. And the Centre Party and the Liberal Party had basically the Liberal Party decided that, like, okay, cool, the January agreement is dead. We're out. We're going to support a right-wing government like we used to do. And their opinion polls, the second they said that, they lost like 3% of their opinion polls. And they had like 4 to start with. So they lost a lot.
Can I just say one thing that I wanted to say since the beginning of this podcast, which is like the only thing I know about the Liberal Party, but I feel like tells you everything you need to know as like an outside observer, which is at some point, fairly recently, they did a rebrand where they changed their logo to a penis. Yes. Effectively, you could just look up Swedish Liberals. You can see their logo. And then turn your phone 90 degrees. But then what I feel like was objectively a bad decision. But then what I feel like tells you about this party is they stuck with it. Yeah. That's still their logo. It's like, I'm doubling down on this bad decision I made.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when they doubled down on the bad decision to try to support a right-wing government, the Centre Party saw that and was like, oh damn. Let's not do that. So they sort of started giving some like tacit support to Löfven. Basically said that like it wasn't back and forth for a long time, like trying to find compromise solutions that didn't work. I can see that you have in the notes that the government have claimed landlords and tenants associations have to come to an agreement. I don't think that's on the thing anymore, but that proposal was basically that Löfven was trying to basically bargain with the left party, saying that like, okay, what if we just don't deregulate the renting market and we just leave it to the tenants union and the landlord associations. We just let them battle it out. And if they can't come, and crucially, if they can't come to an agreement, we're just going to deregulate the housing market anyway.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he put the timeline to like September 1st, and I was like, that's not terribly far away. And it's also just like, we already know the position of both of these like associations, unions. Yeah. They're complete opposite. And
the fact that like if they can't reach an agreement, they're just going to deregulate it anyway, giving no incentive for the landlord association to actually do anything. Which the tenants union said that like, okay, you're giving us the mandate to negotiate, but you're also basically holding a gun to our backs, saying that if we can't just concede everything, you're just going to do it anyway.
I mean, it was offloading the problem. It was like saying, it was different trying to get out of like, I don't want to be the one seen as making this decision, even though I have.
Exactly. But the left party didn't budge on that. The Centre Party eventually budged when it started to look like they couldn't form any government whatsoever.
Right.
And I think what's happened now is that they've made a new government, and Stefan Löfven is back, but on the condition that like they're not going to deregulate the renting market anymore, but the Centre Party has been promised like new concessions, which I'm not super sure what they're all about, but it was enough for the left party to be like, okay, we're going to support like a new January agreement of sorts. And it just barely passed without the support of the Liberal Party. And it only really passed because of like a quirk in the Swedish parliament system, in the sense of like, you don't actually need a majority to vote for the government. You just need a majority to not vote against it.
Yeah, so like it was a lot of abstentions, wasn't it? A lot of people just like,
So there were some from the Liberal Party who just didn't vote. The Centre Party and the Liberal Party voted against it, but the Centre Party just abstained, which means that the only people... It looks kind of undemocratic if you look at the voting records, because it's like 49% of Parliament votes against this coalition and like 25% or something like that votes in favor of it. It passes. It looks a bit sus, but that's how our system works.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask quickly about the. Oh wait, did I cut you off?
No. You.
About this, like the Liberals and the Centre Party, because so throughout all of this, like we were talking about earlier, that they're kind of taken away from the blue bloc or whatever because of the Swedish Democrats, and so it seems like the Liberals are fine when they say we want a centre-right government. They don't say, and the Swedish Democrats are going to be the second biggest party in that coalition, but they're left unstated is that will be the case. And so do you think the Centre Party, do you think that they, I mean, we don't have to try to guess what they're thinking, but do you think that the leadership would cooperate? Because like a 75% of the voting base of the Liberals, like if they lost 3 points of a total 4, that's a pretty strong punishment. Like honestly, an encouraging one, because I think a lot of the fear is that, that they say one thing at the election and then, 2-3 years later, people are like, oh, well, it's been normalized to an extent. So what's the balance of the normalization of the Swedish Democrats, and could the Centre Party also shift, or do you think that it would be too big a political cost?
I think the Centre Party would probably see it as too much of a political cost, because their party leader and sort of their position throughout this entire thing has been they don't want to work with extremist parties. They don't want to concede to extremists. And what they try to do there is they, instead of trying to denounce the right, they sort of try to denounce the left party as being as bad as the Swedish Democrats. Because, it's a former communist party that had ties to Moscow. The left party, back in the day, was very old-timey communist, very pro-Stalin. Obviously, a lot of things have changed since then. But the
They're still sitting in the Comintern waiting for Stalin's orders.
Any day now.
if you ask right-wingers in Sweden, they will believe this.
I just like the idea of just a room full of left-wing Swedes just being like, wait, he died?
It's over?
54?
No, but so the Centre Party has basically been wanting to denounce the left party as being as bad as the Swedish Democrats, and it hasn't really worked out super well. But at the same time, they've also very much strongly denounced the Swedish Democrats as being an extremist party, and the Centre Party really wants to build a sort of center coalition and rebuild a centrist position in Swedish politics, which hasn't really existed for a long time because of the bloc politics. So I don't think that's going to happen. If it does happen, I think it would be political suicide from the Centre Party, especially since all the drama that happened fairly recently. They maybe could do some passive support for a right wing government if the Swedish Democrats aren't given any direct power, some sort of what they did with the left party now, but. Yeah. I doubt it. There is a lot of animosity between the Centre Party and the Swedish Democrats right now. They're seen as basically polar opposites. So it would take a lot for that to work. The Liberals, however, are fine to do it, but they're probably going to be voted out of Parliament due to this loss of popularity.
Oh, damn. That was the penis logo. Just get a lot of horny Swedes on board. Yeah. Damn it.
Yeah. I forgot in 2018, one of the rounds was did it actually happen, or was it just proposed that the Centre Party would lead a bipartisan unity coalition?
Yeah. It was proposed that would happen in a sort of weird monster union between led by the Centre Party, And in government, it would be like the moderate party, which is like the like right-wing party, and the Social Democrats, which are like enemies forever. Didn't really work out, but that was one idea for what could happen as a like wide center coalition. Sweden has done that before as a sort of like emergency anti-extremist government in times of like crisis, but that has only really happened like during the World War, things of that nature.
I'll do it.
Like during the First World War, like it was only done to like prevent communist revolution or like a fascist uprising, and during the Second World War, just to make sure that like Sweden didn't like lose its shit while Europe was like under occupation. So for it to happen over like just a weird election would have been a bit unprecedented.
But we are in a world war today of, like your parents cutting off the account you use for gambling. There's a lot of issues today.
Yeah. They got rid of Flappy Bird from the App Store. I had money riding on that. Yeah, like that weird kind of like consensus, but then like the small party runs it. That's happened in Finland recently, I think. But yeah, it's a thing that has happened in governments before. It might seem strange to like, I don't know, the politics of Germany or the UK, where it still seems like big party win, big party in charge. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a go-to even here, but
that's fair.
Like, there are situations where it could be seen as a sort of compromise solution. Like, yeah.
But yeah, like I'm just Rob's trying to imagine the dark timeline where like the GroKo happens in Germany, but like the FDP is put in charge of it for whatever reason.
It could happen. No, I think, why I'm interested in this, like, Swedish Democrats, I don't know, the ground's always changing, but I do think the AfD have been more normalized, certainly on, like, local levels, like, that, like, I don't know, maybe they're not that bad, or, I mean, it hasn't happened, right? I mean, there's no coalition we can think of, but, like, on any state level. But it seems like there is, for at least, I'm curious, you described earlier that the center voters are like more likely to be renters, but they're supporting the super neoliberal party. So at the base, there is some like pretty, I don't know, there's a definite like militancy isn't the right word, but like, a red line of their own against working with the Swedish Democrats. That's encouraging. And it must be encouraging for like, I don't know, the left or people who are like, okay, you're not in our party, but this phenomenon would redound to their benefit.
Yeah. The center party I would basically say that they would be an equivalent to like the American Democrats, basically, in the sense of like they do have like a lot of pride in their own like, they have a lot of pride in their progressive social values, which they do have a lot of. The center party and the left party are basically like very, very similar to each other when it comes to like mostly, when it was like LGBT rights, women's rights, those types of things, right? But they are like not really aligned with any left party when it comes to economic things. They are very sort of like deregulation, free capitalism, free markets, that type of thing. So that's the only reason why they're with the right wing in the first place. But because they are so progressive, and that's like a big point of pride for them, that like they're the most progressive party in the right wing coalition, or at least were. For them to like work together with the Swedish Democrats is for a lot of like their voters seen as a complete betrayal of like their ideological like roots. Like they might both be supporters of capitalism, but the Swedish Democrats are like hardline conservatives who are very much like against much of what the center party supports.
Yeah, I think the international comparison you can make. So the thing that's like weird from the perspective of Germany is that like the center party here does kind of like really campaign on we're like responsible hands of the economy kind of thing. Whereas I think this sounds more like the Liberal Democrats in the UK, which probably still have like really shitty economic opinions, but they campaign very strongly on being socially progressive, that kind of thing, which that makes sense. That's the strategy of a couple of center parties across the continent and across the world. Sometimes to the detriment of like, we're going to pass something progressive. Don't notice that we've like sold all the like elderly homes to Pepsi, or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So I think that's everything we have. Any last remarks on the Swedish renter situation, or Sweden? Is it good? Decide now.
Mail us now if you think Sweden is good.
Yeah. We have phone voting on this, like early 2000s, like Big Brother shows. Text in.
Yeah.
Is Sweden good?
Click 1 on your phone now.
Excellent. But yeah, any last remarks from anyone before we go into the plugs?
I would ask just like what we alluded to at the beginning that the left party has seen a little bit of a bump from this. Like, what do you think? Do you have any, I don't know, guesses? Anything maybe hopeful for going forward? Something to look out for?
I think I'm hopeful in the sense that like this has, for the first time in a very long time, shown the Social Democrats here, and I think in a lot of like neighboring countries as well, that you can't always count on like the passive support of those who are further to the left. Like this is something that we've seen in many countries, right? Where a party will sort of like present itself as sort of like center left, and then like lurch more to the right wing, but then they tell their entire left wing that like, hey, if you it's either us or the ones who are even worse. Like it's either Joe Biden or it's Trump, like that sort of comparison. And I think this has shown that like you can't always count on that. Like you actually, like if the center left wants to have like more like left support, then they actually have to give concessions. And in the case of here, that has worked out really well. Like the left party is seeing big rise in support. The left party leader has seen like much risen confidence. People see her as being principled. Even people who don't agree with the left party like ideologically at all are seeing the left party as being like supporters of their principles, which is something that is very lacking in a lot of Swedish politics right now. Especially since I mentioned that a lot of parties are doing politics that their own voters don't really support. And that's not just about rents, that's about like basically everything, except for the left party, which actually is doing what it says. And I hope that this will eventually lead to, like in the next election, that maybe like a left-wing-ish government continues. But I'm a bit worried because while this is happening, like for the center and for the left, the right wing is sort of becoming more and more like disillusioned with mainstream politics, and they're not going to go to the left party because they're principled. They're all going to go to the Swedish Democrats because their entire shtick is like anti-establishment politics. And as long as they're not in power, or as long as their politics is not being done, they can keep banging that drum. And so far, it's been really good for them. So I'm a bit. It's all up in the air right now, basically. But I'm hopeful for the left party. I think the left party is doing great.
Yeah, I think this is. I think internationally, this has kind of shown a road forward for some other parties in similar positions to stick to their guns and pull out. I think a good comparison is probably like what's happening just south of you in Denmark, where like the Social Democrats, the center left party, are relatively left wing, but they're also just like justifying that with just like weird racism. Yeah. And no one seems to have like. Last I heard from the I've forgotten the name of the left party in Denmark. I think it's something quite similar to Späti, but they've kind of they like lament the like whole confiscating of jewelry, putting all the migrants onto a disease island kind of shit that's happened in Denmark. But they're just like, but we're getting this stuff done about worker ownership. And it's like, that's pretty cool. It'd be nice if the migrants didn't have the jewelry seized. That would have been good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I wonder, because a lot of the Nordics are in a similar situation. Like Finland's in the same situation where it's a center left being propped up by a left wing party. Yeah. And Mia, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
I believe people can find your work on this little-known app, a website called YouTube. I'd never heard of YouTube before.
Yeah, I have a little side gig on this like niche little website called YouTube.biz.
Oh God, I wish that existed.
I know.
That has to redirect, right? They have to own that domain. If they don't, I'm buying it. But yeah, where can people find you?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm honored to be here as the resident Swedish expert. I've hoped that I've been able to bring some good perspective, and you can find my stuff by search. You can search my name on YouTube. You find on Mia Mulder. You can go to miamulder.com. It'll take you to my YouTube channel where I talk about all sorts of fun things. Or you can come to my podcast, which has nothing to do about politics and has more to do with medical history, which is called Leechfest, which you can find on various podcasting outlets.
That sounds good. I could talk to you about getting a surprise vaccine yesterday.
Ooh.
It wasn't the vaccine we're all meant to get. I've got that already, so I'm pretty happy. It's just like, Ireland doesn't keep records of what vaccines I've got, so the Germans are just like, look, we just have to give them all to you again. Just like,
double vaccine.
You're just getting them.
Your immune system must be the strongest in Europe.
I'm so sick, though. I feel terrible.
Oh, no.
They've just been pumping me full of dead diseases. I don't like it. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on again, and we will put links to all of your stuff in the description. Our theme song is by Melty Brains, great Irish band, New Dawn. Check it out, it is a bop. And we stream every Wednesday looking at weird European YouTube videos. We got very distracted with Hudi, which is the Irish name for Hugo, the interactive troll that Denmark made for children's television. It's a real thing. I went mad trying to find it. Anyway, thanks for listening. We will catch you on the bonus feed on Friday. Ciao, ciao.